We'll start with the story about the chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Adedeji, who has granted complete waiver to some companies. He granted some tax waivers to some companies who, when it comes to the issue of accumulated penalties and interest. And it's a good thing. Whether it's a good thing or not, I'm going to take it to the wise man, tax holiday. For some of the companies that are struggling with their operations, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, deem it fit to grant them tax waiver. Some of the initiatives being used to encourage investors to stay in business. You will agree with me that in recent times, some of these companies, they've been struggling with some of their daily operations due to the removal of fuel subsidy and looking at the cost of operation in a place like Nigeria. So some of these companies, they've been struggling. And the Federal Inland Revenue feels it's necessary to do something to come up with an incentive to encourage them so that they will stay in business and also help them to be able to sustain their production. What do you think could be the impact of this initiative to the operations of some of these businesses?
Well, I think it's good to hear that the tax authority is considering a waiver for some companies who have not been able to meet up their obligations. Here is not just in terms of the tax itself, you're also having interest accumulating on the tax. I think it's always good as a people if we have to engage with stakeholders and first find out reason why people are not able to pay in the first place. Because if operations are not, businesses are not doing well, and you are going to pay taxes, or are they simply evading it? Why is the challenge? What is the issue? So I think there should be a whole lot of collaboration between CAC and the Federal Tax Authority. So that at least businesses that are making profit and they're supposed to be, tax are supposed to be paid out of the profit that business make. And so if businesses are not doing well, then of course we can look at the reason why they are not doing well. And I think it is easier for us to enforce some immediate rules that allow this thing to lie for so many years. A lot of people do business and the books are not kept well. They also thinking of how to also cheat on the system. So what I think is good, but I don't know for how long we are going to be doing this waiver because it has been on for some time. I think it just be good for people to do business with integrity. But government also must have a human face to understand that people who put money in business also need to get return on investment. And that's the only way that people come back again to invest in the system. I was expecting that this would have accompanied the report of the Tax Reform Committee, but unfortunately that report is not out, and FIRS is also doing their own thing. I think we can be more coordinated in terms of operations so that this thing can be taken holistically. We'll hear from the stakeholder what the issues are, and so that government can address this issue once and for all so that you don't find default in terms of people not paying their taxes.
All right, I think it's quite considerate for the FIRS, and it must be a very tight situation for them as well, because they want to ensure that revenue is generated for government. But for the companies that have been giving tax waivers, I do not know what the criteria for the waivers are, what the considerations were. It's said that those companies have never been defaulted, so this probably is the first time they're defaulted, and so is a consideration. If you have companies who've kept a very clean record and who have been paying their tax as it went due, and for once they are defaulting, maybe extend some consideration to them and say, okay, let's waive it, but to what time, how long is a waiver for? That's a question that was a reason. I think that question is very valid. And then for the businesses themselves, is it businesses in a particular sector, or is it spread across all sectors? Those are also issues of interest. And so it's good for the FIRS to give some breathing space to businesses, but so it doesn't become a trend where businesses expect that waivers will be given, and so taxes do not come in or are not paid when they are supposed to be paid. In that case, it will mean that the level of compliance, while you're also giving waivers, you are also giving room for people not to comply with payment. So I do hope that there's a way to ensure balance on all sides. You're giving waivers on...
There is a complete waiver. And I think what they are waiving is the penalties and the interest. You know, if you don't pay your tax,
there are penalties.
Of course, penalties you pay. And then, of course, if it stays, it will accumulate demurrage. And this demurrage is probably what is being waived, not the tax, just to reduce the burden and enable the companies concerned to be able to pay what is required.
I don't understand that very well, and it's still the same point I am making. Because where there are no penalties, it means that I can pay my tax whenever I feel like it. I can delay payment. But where there are penalties, it means that it must be paid when due. But if the waiver is coming maybe generally, not based on the criteria I've talked about, whether those companies have always paid timely, but for some reasons now they're unable to pay timely, and so those waivers are given. So these are the things I'm hoping that the FIRS have looked at to ensure that it doesn't serve as an encouragement in some form of way for people, or for companies rather, to delay payment of their taxes. But if it's for those who have had a good record over time, then I think it is commendable. It is good for them to give them that breathing space so that they can pay without having to add the penalties on top of it.
So I think the real point is to see how we can synergize operations between CAC and FIRS. Because what this will do is that as companies turn in their annual returns, there's a lining with the budget year. FIRS should have the data. And this can be done seamlessly, even with CBN, that as soon as these returns are turned in, the government know what its own tax is. And these things are taken away from source. And they are digitized. I don't need to really have to be pushing for punishment. One of the big problems that I feel we have as a country is the way we interpret laws. We think that once people break law, the next thing to do is to punish them. And I don't think that should be our approach to law enforcement. Laws are supposed to be corrective instruments to make people behave. It's like you stay in city like Lagos here, and you are seeing people like last month, they are hiding by the road to see you commit a traffic offense. Or policemen, they are waiting and they are hiding. All they are looking for is to see you commit an offense so that you can be punished. Now, once you take the punish aspect to law enforcement, what you will continue to find is that people will continue to violate. But if it becomes corrective, that people are trained to obey laws and understand that once there is violation, it's not just a consequence of having to pay fine, because it's easier for people to pay fine than really to be corrected in terms of action. So I feel that in terms of law enforcement, we should be more corrective driven than punishment driven. And when people are punished and they feel, oh, somebody is trying to witch hunt me, but once it's corrective, then of course we ensure that that action is not repeated. All these things that we're talking about still boils down to the e-governance that of course the nation need to embrace, so that all operations are synchronized into one database and we know who is doing what or who is defaulting, and government know how to get its resource out from people.
Well, like you said, governance, there should also be human face to it, and that's exactly what the Federal Inland Revenue Service has displayed. You know, these companies, there was a timeline set for them to pay their taxes, but unfortunately they couldn't meet up due to high cost of doing businesses, and maybe, you know, they've recorded some losses. And I also want to believe maybe also Federal Inland Revenue Service has also considered their history, their antecedent when it comes to payment of taxes. I want to believe this will be done objectively, or will have been done objectively, so that it won't be like some people are being given preferential treatment. And I also hope it's not an opportunity for the company to say, okay, since we've been granted this, you now go home and say, oh, okay, we're expecting another favor another time. It's for them to do what they can do to ensure that they sustain their operation. Well, by and large, I think it's a good thing if it can be extended to some other companies. But most importantly, what we need to do is to also address the issues facing businesses in Nigeria.
But taxes are paid from profit.
Yeah, that's
so
it.
Nobody can begin to claim that he has a high cost of doing business. That's why I can't pay I can't pay.
It's statutory, it's obligatory. But what I'm also saying is, one of the ways to help people or company owners is also to look at the factors affecting their businesses, like the cost of power and all that. The cost of
but you see, all these are factored into your books. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you file a return with CAC, either with a zero profit or a minus profit. And if you have a minus profit, FIRS will come to ask you for tax. Or if you have a zero profit, they won't ask you for tax. Tax is paid on your gross profit. So, if you have made profit, declare it. It's just the fact that somehow
there are some
people are not just patriotic about issues.
And who claim they're not making
something
profit.
happened to me 2 days ago. I was going to recharge my electricity. I got home and I discovered that the thing has expired on prepaid meter. And usually I go to the app to see how I can recharge. And I was trying to do, and I wasn't getting through. So I had to be looking for how to sort myself out. And I called Ikeja Electricity, and they told me, are you sure that you have updated your KYC on the meter? I said no. And they said, oh, without that you cannot pay. And I think this is what government really need to do. And that was a smart technology. So I had to first update my KYC to link my name to my electricity. Then, of course, before I was able to pay. So if you have a government that is integrated, and then people are not uploading the things that they are supposed to upload, then deny them some services, even from the banks. So if the account is frozen, nobody tell them to go and pay. So I feel corrective measure solve some of all this problem, because people are just deliberate. And I think this is because of the nature of our politics, because people feel that, oh, government is not doing enough, and therefore I don't want to fulfill my tax obligation to government. So people must be taught this responsibility, because every right we have, there is a corresponding obligation or responsibility that comes with it.
All right, let's move on to the oil sector, where the federal government is considering revocation of unused oil exploration leases granted to some companies that have failed to conduct exploration activities on them. Certain companies were given the opportunity to explore, oil leases were given to them. And over time, over the years, they've not been able to explore for years. Reasons are best known to them. But the truth is the federal government is considering revoking them in order to bring efficiency and also give room for players who are ready for business to take advantage of the opportunity.
I don't like when government officials always come out to make things that should be administrative issues to become headline news, as if there's anything that is unique about this. Some of all these licenses, they said are expired. If a license is expired, don't renew it. So it's as good as not existing. Now, but I think further away from that is that we also need to do a comprehensive assessment and audit of the entire system and processes. I don't see a reason why somebody will want to take a license, for example. And some of all these licenses were there since 2003. I remember vividly, there were some group of people, and I think Abia governor then, Ojukalo, was among of those who actually got a license to do refined petrol here in 2003. They were excited to do it because government said they were liberalizing. But unfortunately, you were telling them to refine, but to go and sell in another market. So that was not good enough. So if I'm refining here, and I have to go sell the petrol somewhere else, maybe in Cotonou or Togo, which means, of course, you have to invest more in infrastructure that will make that possible. You see that you are going to lay a pipe, which, of course, government is not going to do for you, to take your product to where you want to sell it. And I think these are some of the restrictions and limitations that is in that sector. And don't forget, some of these companies also were told, some of them had to even get into litigation with government because of breaches and of contracts and agreement. So I feel that government should get into business with citizens or foreigner with SLAs, service level agreements, which is clear enough for both parties, and conditions for termination of this contract should be clearly written, so that if a contract is not performing, you don't need to come to the public to tell us that, oh, I want to cancel this license. Even the person understands that, look, I'm already breaching the terms of this agreement, that we've agreed that this is what you're going to do, and if you don't have the capacity to do it, then government is not under any obligation to continue to wait for you. And I think this has happened in a couple of times, and again, for especially the Ministry of Justice, who really review contracts on behalf of the country, needs to do well in terms of signing of agreement between the nation and either business people, local or foreign business people. They should do their due diligence to ensure that the appropriate clauses are there, because there's no procurement that is going to be done that will be done as a Ministry of Justice, who are supposed to have their lawyers read through this agreement and see that the terms are favorable to the nation and also will allow businesses to prosper. So I just feel that public officers need to up their game in terms of really representing the nation. So we don't get into these people taking contract that they don't have capacity to deliver, and then of course we hold the whole country to ransom just because we want to fulfill some political settlement or obligation to some people who we think we owe it to. So I think these for me are the real issues. Let's evaluate the whole system, look at what are wrong, why are people not able to use those licenses, and if there are limitations, if there are legal constraints that is making those agreements not to be functional, then government find a way to take them away so that people can sign contract with government and then they go ahead and do their business. For a man to wake up in the morning and say, oh, I want to obtain a license, that person is ready to run. So, but I also feel that some people also want to take it and use it, hoping that they can also sell and make money out of it. So all this prospecting can be done by the agencies concerned doing their due diligence. Show your balance sheet. Let's see your feasibility study. Where is the funding going to come from? So all these questions, if they are properly asked, we will give the license to those who have capacity to do the work, and not just somebody who want to use the license for agency.
You took the words out of my mouth, because all the while you were talking, in my mind and in my thinking, and I know this is the true situation in some of these cases, it is about shopping for something you would use later. Because from the beginning, some of these persons who apply for the licenses know that they do not have the capacity for exploration. Exploration is not something that you can just do by yourself or without certain structure and certain funds available.
You think they will apply, without considering the fact if they have the capacity or not?
Hold on. It's like we see in other sectors, people securing licenses or bidding for contracts they know they will not execute or cannot execute with the intention of subletting. So that has often been the practice. It is not even the first time that we're hearing about licenses or exploration licenses being about to be revoked. It has often come up before. Like it also said, there's a time frame. Even for broadcasting, if you are given license today by the NBC for you to commence broadcast, after a certain period of time, if you do not, it can be revoked. So it applies to every sector. For how long have they been given licenses? Did you check what happened years after? So it's been like a practice. And I think the announcement really is to send messages across to persons who want to bid again for the licenses. It has often been the practice. A lot of persons, or sometimes when people bid for licenses, they do not have the intention of actually going through with it. It's just to make some extra money from it. You become the middleman between those who have the capacity and those who are issuing the licenses. But it is high time to bring sanity into the system by ensuring that whatever license you give, maximum, if within a year there are no signs of work commencing, then you should be issuing warnings about the license being revoked.
Yeah, I'll give you a very small example. Some years ago, I wanted to start a small business of production, and I need this equipment from China. And they require for me to import this machine, bank guarantee. For the process to happen. It took my bank 6 months to process the guarantee. And that was a very terrible experience for me. Because I had taken the facility. The money was in the bank. Now the bank to issue an LC to the company supplying me the machine.
It's taking months.
Taking months. And then the bank came back to tell me that the loan was not performing. For a machine that has not come. You see, these are some of the things that you see happen in business. People have a good mind, they want to do a business. But you see, within the systems, there is these exuberances created by institutions, both of states and of private, who are supposed to enter into partnership. And you know, you are processing this license, you are also telling your partner, maybe they are abroad and all these things, and they are asking for due diligence, and the things that you are asking for, some of them are also not coming, as it were. And then, of course, this party becomes suspicious. We are losing trust. And in the middle of this, you have completely lost out. And therefore, you can no longer pursue whatever assignment that you need to do. But I think what we need to really do, so that we don't get into these issues, I keep advocating, if the government can embrace e-procurement, where, of course, it may not be at it may not be a full phase of e-procurement. Say, you look at it that at least these preliminaries, which are critical to operations, are done without human interface. So that at the point of their award, of course, you cannot decide to say, okay, those who are qualified, and then, of course, assess them based on the qualification. But for issues that have to do with fund, that can be seen either from your bank guarantee or your insurance guarantee that is issued by your bank that is supposed to fund that project. And if that is not issued, then of course there's no need asking to give somebody a license or give somebody a contract when you know that it does have capacity to perform. And I think this is all we need to do, because here, like you said, is a whole lot of speculation. We know of cases in time past in this country where people who had no shovel were giving construction of road. They have never been in construction before. They are not engineers. They don't have a company that does construction, but they win federal contracts. So this practice has been there in time past, and we hope that these kind of practices are giving way. And because these are what are actually accounting for most of the abandoned projects we talk about in the country, which is running into their thousands and in their millions. So if government had to be done very well, I don't think we should be doing, if you want to do somebody a favor with capacity. And then you understand that nobody is losing. But here you are doing somebody a favor who has no capacity. And in some cases, government even have to advance loan to some people, like it happened in the case of Disco, when of course that aspect was being privatized, that the government even need to empower them, haven't taken over the assets of the default NEPA. So these are some of the things we do here that really makes people to be suspicious of us as very corrupt people. I think we can change our practices, that people who have capacity, people who have competence, people with character should be those government do business with, and they should be able to show it.
All right, before we wrap up, let's look at what is happening in South Africa. The South African authorities planning to launch the first electric vehicle in 2026 as part of the plans for the green energy transition. You know, the issue of electric vehicle, that's what's in vogue now. Every nation is doing all they can do to catch up with that because it's a reality we have to live with. Do you think South Africa is coming up too early or too late? The plan is for 2026 in 3 years' time.
How can it be too early? It's already getting too late. And you know this conversation has been on in Europe for close to 10 years now. And then, of course, they've set a deadline for themselves. And by 2030, Europeans are expected that almost all their car, and by 2050, completely, there'll be no petrol car or gas car in Europe. It will be all purely electric cars. So it is a case of having to just wake up to your reality. That's how I would want to say it, because it's a new reality that all of us have to face. Because at the end of the day, like I always say, the knife and the yam is with the Europeans and the Americans and the Asians. So it's what they cut for you, you will take. Because if you don't prepare for this, it will suddenly swarm up on you, and then of course you have to find a way to wriggle out of it. Even us as a country, we don't have option except that we are able to evolve our own indigenous and local technologies to be able to do some of all these things. Because what really happened, what we call a car manufacturer here, are actually supposed to be an assembly plant, and this completely knocked down plant parts you get from Europe and the America or Asia. So once these knockdown parts are no longer there, your assembly plant will fold. So it's only wise for you to be strategic enough to be looking into the future, because the person who is dragging you, that's where they are going, and you know they are bigger than you. So you have to queue behind them so that you can follow them. Otherwise, you will be left behind. And I think that's what South Africans are doing. And also, they are also getting funding also from the World Bank also to do some of all these things, especially as the world look toward a complete green world. But how far this will take us is a different ball game, whether we will be able, because South Africa is also having electricity problem like all African countries, because this also will have to depend whether we are going to increase our capacity to generate electricity to be able to charge these millions of cars that will be on our roads.